Hi, are we ready to do some Hebrew? I wanted to give a video to introduce a few things about the Hebrew language, to try to remind you and to try to help to empower you to get off to a successful start. Again, remember, we're reviewing. We're going to have grammatical analysis assignments over the next couple of weeks. You'll get some feedback. You'll see notes. Some of the things that you think you've forgotten will come back, and hopefully you'll learn a few new things at the same time and get some confidence at looking at the Hebrew text, especially in comparison with English translations, or if you're working in another language, the language, whatever that language is, whether it's Spanish or German or Haitian, Creole, and understand how we get our translations out of the Hebrew text. Okay, so to be able to do grammatical analysis, let's talk about a couple of things. First, let's talk about the tools that you're going to need. You're going to need access to the Hebrew text. Now, this could be, if you're really good at it, you can just use your BHS text, your Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, which is your academic text. I should have grabbed it. I have it right here, something like this. You can also use computer programs like BibleWorks or GramCord or Accordance. And there's also free software online. The key is you need to be able to get the parsing on Hebrew words. And what I mean by parsing is if it's a noun, can you tell whether it's plural, masculine or feminine, construct or absolute? And obviously on verbs we're talking about what's the stem or the binyan, the call, nifal, pe'el. I'm going to say more about these. And then what type of verb is it? Is it a perfect, an imperfect, a participle, past narration, or verb consecutive imperfect? Those things, we're going to say something else about that. But you need to be able to parse. And one of the key things is, remember, what we're doing is analyzing the biblical text. So you're going to need access to a Hebrew text. You're also going to want to have access to 2 or 3 English translations. And again, if you're working in a non-English language primarily within your ministerial context, I would encourage you to use a translation of whatever language you're going to be working out of. You have 2 to 3 English translations to compare and contrast with each other while you're analyzing the biblical text. And you're also going to need a copy of Arnold Choi, the required text that we have in the syllabus. Now, without Arnold Choi, you can't do the assignment, so make sure you get access to that document. If you don't have it, send me an email immediately. Because grammatical analysis is not an exercise in just parsing and giving a sample translation. What we're talking about is using the categories of syntactical analysis that we have in Arnold Choi to describe how depending on what type of Hebrew word we're looking at, describe the ways in which it can be translated, and specifically how it is translated in some English in our modern translation. A great example of what we're talking about, and I think one of the all-time funniest things in presidential history, was back when Bill Clinton was president and the so-called Monica Lewinsky affair happened. And some of you aren't old enough, but one of the funniest things a public officials ever said was he was asked a pretty pointed question, and Clinton replied, "It depends on what you mean by the word is." And I thought to myself, boy, this guy's been in exegesis class, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to ask ourselves, what's the specific connotation, what's the force, what are the possible meanings of words that most of the time we take for granted. So again, to do grammatical analysis, you're going to need a recourse to the Hebrew text, a couple of English translations that you can compare to see if there's difference in ways of understanding the Hebrew text, and Arnold Choi, which will give you the categories by which to describe the grammar that you're seeing. And as far as the grammatical analysis assignments go, and I'm going to say more about this in another video, we're going to look at 3 pieces. We're going to look at all the nouns in the verses we see. We're going to look at verbs. And we're going to look at prepositions. these are the things that are going to be required, because there's a lot of the exegetical decisions that we make turn on how we understand the ways that these get translated in our particular sentences. Now, some of you are advanced, and there are advanced Hebrew students, and I want you to push yourselves. And if you find yourselves being pretty good at this, you can go ahead and also add the different particles that we will find in the Hebrew text as well. Now, in terms of nouns, again, the key thing here is going to be looking at nouns in the absolute state and in the construct state. And when you look at Arnold Choi, your nouns in the absolute state are principally going to be your subject nouns, your object nouns. The construct is going to be your genitives. And it's going to be important, this is the word genitive here, I know it's getting a little bit small, this is my low-tech video recording equipment, so I apologize for that. We'll keep working on trying to make this a little bit clearer here. So your absolute construct and genitives. Now, verbs, just to quickly review this, we're going to have perfect, imperfect, perfect, imperfect, and then depending on when you took Hebrew, John Cook is going to call this past narrative, this next category in his book. You'll also hear this called Vav consecutive, or Vav converting, or prefixed conjugation. There's a couple different things that get used for this. But past narrative. Now, the key thing is when you translate the past narrative into the Arnold Choi book, and yeah, Bill Arnold and John Cook both teach at Asbury, but they use different terminology so far. In the revision in our Arnold Choi book isn't going to happen. Now, when we're analyzing past narrative, and do write this down somewhere, you want to look the past narrative up in Arnold Choi. He calls it 3.5.1 imperfect plus Vav consecutive. 3.5.1. Now notice this is different than regular imperfects, which this is going to be in 3.2.2. You can just look at the table of context. Perfects are 3.2.1. So you want to keep those separate. Remember, the difference is perfect's completed action. You can read about this in the Arnold Choi book. The imperfect is incomplete action. So in Hebrew, a perfect is typically translated in the past tense, because that's completed action, or action that's complete. The imperfect is often future tense, because there's no action more incomplete than something that hasn't yet happened. But then when you get to this past narration, it's past tense. There's actually time involved, and it's completed action. And what we're going to find, especially in Exodus and in narrative, this is the most common type of verb that you're going to find. And I know in the Hebrew class that there's a tendency not to have this used as frequently. Okay, I'm going to stop here on this video, and we'll come back with a part 2 and pick some of this up.